Concerning Rome, it is only in the 1st century BC that we can explore the city in detail, because a wealth of words survives from this time, from private letters to public speeches, from philosophy to poetry, epic and erotic, both high and lowbrow. Roman history, as we know it, begins here. So, 600 years after Rome was founded, our tale begins with whispers of revolution, with a terrorist plot to destroy the city, with undercover operations and public protests, with a bloody battle fought by Romans against Romans, and with citizens being rounded up and executed in the interests of national security. This is 63 BC, 2,100 years ago. On one side is Lucius Catiline, a resentful, bankrupt aristocrat and the mastermind of a plot to assassinate Rome's elected officials and burn the place down, with the aim of resetting all debts of rich and poor alike. On the opposite side is Cicero, the famous philosopher, politician and public speaker, and one of those marked for assassination. The chronology can still be traced in detail, because we know where much of it happened, and in some places we can even look upon the same buildings where the events unfolded. We can follow the covert work that gave Cicero inside information on the plot, and see how Catiline was forced out of the city to his army north of Rome, and then into battle with the official Roman legions. We can also observe the ethical questions that the plot raised, some of which can be seen mirrored in our own time, and the tough response by Cicero, including ordered executions, raised questions like, is it just to eliminate terrorists outside the due process of law? Should we be suspicious of our own guilty until proven innocent reaction to certain crimes? How far should civil rights be sacrificed in the interests of national security? And if they are sacrificed past an extreme point, is it even a nation worth securing? The Romans never ceased to debate the conspiracy of Catiline. Was he wholly evil, or was there something to be said in defence of what he did, and at what price was revolution averted? The events of 63 BC and the slogans created then have continued to repeat through Western history. Some of the exact words spoken in the tense debates that followed the discovery of his plot still find a place in our political rhetoric, and are still paraded on banners and even in the tweets of modern protests. Whatever its rights and wrongs, the plot lets us peer into the centre of Roman political life of the time, and it lets us witness in action the Senate and the Roman people, two groups whose names can still be seen abbreviated in stone, in the recognisable SPQR, Senatus Populus Q Romanus. SPQR is still plastered all over Rome, from manhole covers to rubbish bins. It can be tracked to Cicero's time, and even has its own amusing parody, Sono Pazzi Questi Romani, or These Romans Are Mad. The cast of characters in our crisis includes some well-known figures from history. Julius Caesar, 15 years before his assassination, made a radical speech on how to punish the conspirators. And Crassus, the Roman politician, who notoriously remarked that you could not count a man rich if he does not have the coin to raise his own private army, played some mysterious part behind the scenes. At centre stage, as Catiline's main adversary, we find the man who it is possible to get to know better than anyone else from the ancient world. Cicero's speeches, letters, jokes, and writings still find many volumes of modern printed text. There is no one else in antiquity whose life is documented more. And it is mostly through Cicero's eyes and his prejudices that we see the Roman world of the 1st century, and the year 63 BC was a turning point for him. Things were never quite so good for Cicero again. His career ended 20 years later in failure, while still confident of his own importance and still possessing a degree of authority, but no longer in the front rank. He was murdered in the civil wars that followed the assassination of Caesar in 44 BC, his head and right hand pinned up in the centre of Rome for all to see. Apparently, his last words to his killer were, "There is nothing proper about what you are doing, soldier, but please try and kill me properly." And although Cicero had saved the Eternal City in 63 BC, the truth is that the state in the form he knew wouldn't endure much longer, because there was another kind of revolution on the horizon, which would be more successful than Catilina's. To the Senate and people of Rome was soon added the overbearing figure of the Emperor, embodied in a line of rulers, some of whom were good, some bad, and all have formed a major part of our history. But back to the plot and our dual protagonists. Of the two, Catilina had a more privileged and safer start in life, and in politics, he came from an eminent old family that traced its line back to the founding fathers of Rome. His ancestor, Sergestus, fled from the east to Italy with Aeneas of Troy after the Trojan War, and among his other ancestors was his great-grandfather, Marcus Sergius Silas, a hero of the war against Hannibal. Catilina had a promising early career and was elected to a series of political offices. But by 63 BC, he was close to bankruptcy. A string of crimes was attached to his name, from the murder of his first wife and his own son to sex with a virgin priestess. But aside from his personal troubles, his financial problems came from his repeated attempts to secure election as one of the two consuls, which were the most powerful political posts in the city. Pursuing these posts in ancient Rome was expensive, and by the 1st century it required the kind of grand generosity that is almost identical to bribery. The stakes were high, and successful candidates had the chance to recoup their spendings, legally or illegally, by the perks of office, while the failures fell ever more deeply into debt. So this was Catilina's position after he was beaten in the elections for consulship in both 64 and 63 BC. His reach had exceeded his grasp, and he was left with just two choices: accept defeat gracefully and work to pay his debts, or resort to revolution or terrorism, depending on your perspective. He joined forces with other upper-class desperados in similar difficulties, and together they appealed to the support of the discontented poor of the city, who they knew would jump at the chance to burn away all debts after leading such miserable lives. And there was no end to his promises of debt relief, which was one of the worst forms of radicalism in the eyes of the Roman nobles, or to his bold threats to kill the leading politicians and burn Rome. Meanwhile, he gathered his army outside the walls.